It's a show about women as your leads, you know, Nicole, Sarah, Yu Ji-young, written by women, produced by women, shot by women, art directed by women. And the man, I was laughing, I was like, objectified. I'm the one who runs around naked and I'm the supporting character. I was like, oh my God, it's a great reversal.
Filmmaker Magazine presents Back to One with Peter Rinaldi.
Jack Huston is an actor. He sat down with me in New York City to talk about the work.
Do you have a typical way that you like to begin your preparation process when you have a new character and you start to think, how am I going to wrap my arms around playing this person? Is there a typical first step that you take?
You know what? And it's a really weird first step because it's not even to do with whether the material itself or what, you know, the part is. It's whether I can maybe hear their voice in my head. Such a strange way of saying it, because the voice, I find voice, you know, sometimes is the key to everything. If you can imagine the way the person speaks, their cadence, the height of their voice, the sort of, you know, whether someone's quite guarded, quite subtle, if it's soft, if it's loud, if it's very present, you know, the way someone, you know, talks is very much their personality. And if I feel like I can sort of hear them, or how I would hear them if I was that person, that's usually quite a big one for me. And sometimes, you know, it's a script or you know, that I might not completely get, or I think they're, you know, it's just about, yeah, I like the idea that their voice somehow, like that tells me I might be able to get there. And I always find it fascinating that, you know, out of the billions of people there are, that you can hear someone's voice and you know that that's that person.
Yeah.
Isn't that amazing?
Yeah, it is.
And I'm saying, like, that you can actually, from a radio,
Yeah.
you know, or you know, or an interview, or close your eyes and someone speaks and their first word, you're like, oh, that's Jack Nicholson.
Yeah, yeah,
you know,
yeah.
that's my brother.
Yeah.
God, that's my best friend Sam. You know, I mean, like, out of all of the voices that we hear every single day.
And we're really getting a firsthand realization of this with AI and this voice thing. Yeah. When we're like, ooh, that's kind of like me, but it's spooky, not. Man, it's not him, it? Right? Yeah, it really is.
But like, you know, that we're now able to sort of, you know, it's, I guess it is that whole AI thing. You know, it's like stealing. It's like literally, but stealing one's soul.
Right.
You know, I mean, it's sort of digressing in a little way, but it's you know, I when I first sort of started acting and, you know, performing on stage, that was one thing, because it was all about sort of elocution, it was about projection, it was about, you know, boom, you know, this whole idea of it. And then sort of moving on to film, and really it was the moment where I used to be sent a lot of characters that were me. And, you know, agents don't really see past you as a person. You have to do something to say, oh, he's a character actor.
Yeah.
And I remember when I got sent Boardwalk Empire, I wasn't sent it for the specific role. I was sent, and I read the script and I said, this guy's interesting. And I came up with the voice, and I realized that voice was my key into that person, into that character. And it was this sort of revelation for me as an actor, because I said, you know, if you could, you know, the way he spoke, the way he sort of pulled himself, you can hear someone shy. You can hear the embarrassment in someone's voice.
Yeah.
You can hear the nerve in someone's voice. You know, the nerves. There's so much behind it, and you know, sometimes someone can come out all bullish and say stuff, but you also don't. You know, you can also hear the lies in someone's voice.
Right.
So it's an interesting way of looking at it, and I never really heard someone do that. So.
And that character, of course, half of his face is
Yeah.
not. So you're not able to use your whole face as
Yes,
an actor.
exactly.
So that's even more important, where you have to bring up that voice side.
And really nurture that voice and how he speaks, because also,
Right.
I said it's uncomfortable for him to speak.
Right.
So when he does speak, it has to be about something. I'm like a puppy, you know what I mean? Like I speak too much sometimes, you know, like I'm blah, 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 because it's sort of like my affability. It's sort of like, you know, sort of relating to someone. I sort of sometimes overcompensate. But that's just natural as a person, but I think that's quite telling of
Right,
who I am.
right.
And then I thought about someone like Richard Harrow, which when he is speaking, has to be about something. It's very pointed. Like he's not going to waste a word,
Yes.
because he also doesn't like doing it.
Yes.
So
It's
confront
also,
that.
it feels embarrassing for American actors to look at our friends across the pond who have their hand on the voice thing a little bit better.
Right.
Is it because the foundation is the stage, and the voice is so important there, right? As a foundation.
Yes, no, it is. It is. Well, because it's, what I always said, and it's also language, isn't it? The voice, and it's how you sort of say something. It's like if you watch Shakespeare, and I did this with my kids. My daughter, she goes to a French school, but she was just doing, the Scottish play Macbeth, and even when I was a kid and I was taking this, if something's performed badly or not with a handle or a grasp on the language, it's completely foreign.
Yeah.
You don't understand a bloody
Yeah,
word.
yeah.
Whereas you could be a 8-year-old kid, and if it's said with intention and you've got a
Interesting.
grasp of the language,
Yes.
and you're posing it to somebody
Yes.
in such a way, somehow it becomes clear and you understand, and it's one of the most beautiful, miraculous moments that you can sometimes just understand somebody from the way someone speaks.
That's true.
To
That's
you.
so true.
There's a fun way in that. I found languages, and all the great actors, like when you really go back, it's like why people do impersonations of the great actors.
Yeah.
It's because their voice
Yeah.
is so familiar,
Yeah.
and you instantly know, are you doing Al Pacino, or or it's suddenly you're Jack Nicholson, and it's like all these different things. It's like it's amazing that these sort of it's like everything they have. They're so specific.
That's true.
It's so specific,
It's really
and it's
true.
all these sort of titans. That's right. Have very specific voices.
Yes.
I've spent nights lying in bed thinking to myself, do I have a unique voice? Because I'm like, oh my God, because
That's
is there, and obviously there's exceptions to the rule.
Yeah.
But when you really do think about all of those,
Yes. Oh my God.
all of those people, you go, God, you like, it's just, from everybody.
Yeah.
It's really like, even those huge politicians.
Yeah,
And then
yeah.
you think about it, like somehow you're like, everybody does their voice.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like,
But this kind of stuff could really drive you crazy, right? If you're laying in bed, because you and you even said this, right? That you're a good-looking guy, so in the beginning, right, people are like, he's a leading man type guy, but you're like raising your hand saying, please, actually, I'm an actor.
I really don't like them. Yeah, exactly.
I want to do character stuff, and then you venture off into this realm where you're, like you said, you have to prove that you can, and then they'll open up the door for you as.
And then you do all the characters, and then you want to do the leading man stuff.
of course.
They're like, well, he's not. He's a character actor, and you're like, are you kidding me?
And then you do one though, and then you're back.
And then you're back.
And then you're like, you got it all.
I mean,
it's so insane that we are like this.
So insane.
I mean, you could say like the representatives are like this, but it's really everyone. You have to prove to the audience that you're a leading man too.
Oh, 100%. It's so funny. There is that idea where, the leading man stuff, there's the white whale of roles, which is like character leading man.
Right,
You know,
right,
like
right.
when you do go and do it, you know, like
Right.
what Christian Bale's sort of doing on
Right.
every performance. It's like,
Right.
you know, he's like managed to sort of, you know, find that
Right.
sort of amazing niche where
Yeah.
it's like, if he's going to take on a role, it's not only leading man, but it's also a fascinating character
Right, right.
that he's able to completely change. And obviously Daniel Day-Lewis, for, you know, every
Right.
time, it's why you sort of wait with bated breath for any performance the guy does, because you
Yeah.
know, whatever the film, it's going to be interesting.
Yeah,
you know,
right,
he's
right.
going to have a new take on something we've never seen before,
Yes.
and it's amazing.
You said once that you had actually a hard time transitioning from the stage to film acting,
yeah,
right? Like
yeah,
where it
very
was.
hard.
It seems to me though that would be easier than the other way around, right? I mean, like, what was it? What was it that you needed to get used to about film acting?
You know, it's so funny. It's like, it maybe wasn't as much as when I was on set. It was the auditioning process.
Oh,
It was that idea of, you know, if you're on stage, you know, you're. I always said it's interesting. You never enjoy the first 10 minutes of a play. Like you don't. Like whatever happens is, you're suddenly being put in this room where you're watching people pretend you're not there.
you have to try and believe them.
And like suddenly, so you've got 10 minutes where you're like, oh, either this is going to be great or it's just awful. But if anybody says the first 10 minutes of a play is fantastic, they're wrong, because it's not that. Like we have to, you know, we have to suddenly go into the realm of fantasy.
Right, right.
Like we have to go with you on that. So that takes a very good actor. And sometimes, every now and again, some will come out and it's like, oh, I'm already with you, like in the first couple of minutes. But you know, that's a rare occurrence. So I say it's you've got in theatre 10 minutes to win your audience, you know, and then you either win them or you lose them. And then they're with you for the ride.
Yeah.
And they're going to go with you everything you do. And, you know, the thing about film acting is it's all about the subtleties. Like if, you know, it's like a magnifying glass. So for the first time I can whisper.
Right.
You know, it's for the first time, the slightest movement, and also the camera, you know, the edit, what you're looking for in film is, can I work, you know, not only will they give me the performance, but I can also be the architect of this performance in my edit as a filmmaker, and I can take that, there's subtleties, I can find this, there's something there, you know. It doesn't have to be perfect straight off the bat. It can be a bit of a jigsaw that we're going to put piece together. And the thing about stage is, you know, I took a long time getting into character. So the whole idea of walking into a room and being the person it was foreign to me. So I would always be like, you know, but I'm not going to do that, what I just did for you. So the audition was like, it's not going to, I got to be honest, I'm like, what I just did now is not what I'm going to do on screen. So I think it probably scared the shit out of a lot of filmmakers, because they were like, what do you mean?
We want that.
This is what we're casting. I was like, I'm like maybe 5% of the way there. You know, like, just you wait. And by the way, it might be awful when I get 100% of the way there. And it might be something that you really don't like. But, you know, it's like, do you get the essence? Like, are you getting the flavor of what I could do? You know, because, but sometimes something just speaks to you, like Boardwalk, and that character was funny. I just read and I was like, oh, I don't know. Like, I know you. Like, I know you. I know who he is. He's like a part of me. So it's like sometimes you're lucky enough to come across that character that you can do.
What is your ideal amount of time that you really would need? And you can be insane right now. When you answer this question, don't be afraid if the number is high. The amount of time that you would ideally need to get into a character from when they say you got the part until the first day?
Depending. I mean, but I'd say 6 months. 6 months would give you, because you want to, you want it to be so familiar that you're not thinking.
Yeah.
And I think the familiarity, and that means time when you're not thinking about it, but actually subsequently thinking about it.
Right.
So it's the last thing you think about before you fall asleep, and usually the first thing you think about when you wake up. And you're just muttering and speaking to yourself and sort of playing around, and then you feel confident that you can improvise as that person, as that player. You know, if you can't answer questions and sort of be present as that character, then you're probably not ready.
Right.
You know, that's sort of the trick of it, is like,
Yes.
you shouldn't just be able to do what's written on the page and perform that. You should, and by the way, with utter respect to what's written on the page, because you should be able to be so familiar with that character that when you do come to the page, it's innate, it's part of you, and that's very good. And it's an interesting one. Some people, you know, when we talk about the method or their different methods of performing, I don't stay in character because I feel like I can slip into the character very happily.
And that also probably takes time then too.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I
Yeah.
think that's it. And you know, sometimes I was never that actor. You can't help but take it a bit away with you and what's going on that night, and depending on what type of scene or movie or play you're doing, of course, if it's a sort of rather harrowing, you know, drama, but you know, yeah, you're gonna be taking parts of that into your daily life, and I'm sure my wife would say I'm a much more difficult person to live with, depending on the type of film or play I'm making. You know,
Yeah.
I always say I'd love to be an actor who just can like go and be themselves and just be like so confident that they're great, that
Yeah.
they can play themselves over and over again. I'm like, that sounds like the best ever.
Yeah.
Because I just don't think I have the confidence that I'm interesting enough to make loads and loads of movies as myself. It's like can you do something?
Yeah.
Whereas a lot of my absolute favorite
Right.
actors
Right.
are, you know, certain comedians or
Yeah.
people who do dramas,
Yeah.
but it's because it's them and they're familiar to me and I love watching them.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just have never felt like I'm that guy.
Yeah.
So it's interesting.
Yeah.
You know?
You feel like you're not enough.
I'm not enough. Exactly. I'm totally not enough. I don't think, I'm like, even on my own, I'm like, God, I have to listen to this guy in my head. I'm like, geez.
And this is what I think people don't understand, that you know, everyone's getting mad at the quote method way of doing it. You know, you see these headlines, you know, it was a terrible time to deal with blank while he was in his method. You know, it's like it's a horror for everyone else, and then but everyone seems to think like that's the height of it. Like they're doing it because they have a lack.
No,
like,
right,
and they're actually they would be the first to say it. I'm doing this because I don't know how else
to do it. I don't know how to do it.
If you gave me a better way and that worked, I would do it.
I couldn't agree, and that's the thing. And I think it was really interesting. And I love actors. Like I love people. I love being part of, you know, just an ensemble. I love being part of a team. I love being part of, you know, the same in the theatre, directors, writers, crew, everybody. I really enjoy the process and understand how important everybody is in front of, behind the camera, on stage, you know, off stage. It's like, it's a great team and it's such a wonderful thing to be a part of. And I think being on the other side of the camera for the first time, it was really interesting because I realized there's no one way to speak to an actor. Every actor's different. And it's about being sensitive to their process, not the other way around. So how I spoke to one person was completely different to how I spoke to somebody else.
Yes.
And it was like trying to weigh up, what do they need from me?
Yeah.
And what is going, and sort of how I feel. Like, yeah, I like when someone comes and says, that was great, or that's not working. You know, I mean, I like people speaking to me about it. You know, I think it helps, but you know, sometimes people don't need you necessarily to come and speak to them. It's sometimes about something else, or you mask it with something else, or say, oh, it's about someone else. Or, what I really found was looking at the story as a whole. So if something wasn't working, it was because it didn't work in conjunction with the story in its entirety. So one would point out, you know what, we've got this bit and we've got to get here. So do we think this is right for this moment? You know what I mean? So it's not a criticism, it's the conversation. And I find that that's what actors quite like, is the conversation.
Yeah.
And it gives them that opportunity. I remember my grandfather, was always known for not speaking to his actors. And the reason he didn't was he was like, well, I cast them for that reason, because I thought they were right for the role. And now I'll do my part and you do yours.
Yeah,
And of course, and I remember, I think it was, I think it might have been like Marilyn Monroe or someone who said he never spoke to me, and they said, well, if you did something he didn't like, he would have.
Right.
It was a good sign if he wasn't speaking to you.
Right.
And that's very hard for us to digest, because we need affirmation. We need praise. We need, like you were saying, you need that smile.
That's right. But I do think it's better to say nothing than the wrong thing.
Than the wrong thing, exactly.
Right? An absolute blank face is
Yeah.
better than almost like maybe 90% of the things that you can say.
I so agree, man.
Right?
I think that, by the way, you might have found that's the trick is I think people as directors or around, they feel they have to say something.
That's right.
Or else they're not doing their job.
Right.
And that's the sort of point, isn't it? It's like, actually, repetition gets you there.
That's
so
it.
sometimes it's just, let's do another. I remember Michael Pitt saying the best sort of direction was from Martin Scorsese, in essence, was he was like, let's do another and do another, and he was doing it sort of like the same again, and he was like, anything, he was like, no, just do it again. And he was like, that was such a great piece of direction, because it's like sometimes just doing it again leads you to the performance, because it takes a second, but just repetition, you in your head work out those bits that, that's working, that's not really working. And it's quite nice sometimes for a director to sort of let you get there. And and we have an awful way that we think by someone saying something to us means we're doing something wrong. And therefore we get in our own head.
Right.
So, if someone's not saying anything to you, then just, you're not in your own head. You're just continuing in essence.
Right.
So.
And I think that's also why maybe a director should also consider maybe being really even keeled, even when they really knock one out of the park. Right? Because if you're like, oh my God,
then you expect it every time.
Then they're like, he didn't really jump up that time.
Why? I know, that's all you want.
That's
all you want, and you see it, so you feel it.
So an even keel of it, bad or good, is actually probably because even when something's bad, but the director's almost the same as they were when you were amazing. Just makes you want to go back again. And right,
it's so true. No, you really are so right. It's so, when I think about the great directors that I've been lucky enough to work with, they were so even. They were so sort of cool. Like they had almost the same. When they got it, it was the same reaction every sort of time.
I wonder if they calculated that though, or they're just like that.
That was conscious. It's like inside I'm crying or I'm screaming with joy. It's like, but they just look and say, yeah, good. Okay, let's go. Let's move on. Like, really? It's so true.
Yeah. Did you work with, as an actor, every one of the actors that you put in the day of the fight, or did you have people you didn't know how they worked yet?
Yeah, a lot of people who I didn't know how they worked. Some that I had, some that had been a long time. It was very much that moment of I really did take what my granddad said. It's 90% is casting.
Yeah.
You get the right person for the role.
Yeah.
And you just feel it. It's like the two people that I wrote for were Michael Pitt and Joe Pesci. And I was almost like if one of those guys said no, I couldn't make the film.
Yeah.
And then everyone else, from Ron Perlman I'd worked with before, John McGarr I'd worked with before, Steve Buscemi I'd worked with before, Angela Youssef I'd worked with before, Nicolette Robinson, who played the female I hadn't.
She's amazing, right?
And she sent me that was like an amazing story how that came about, because we were actually deep in negotiations with someone else and the dates weren't working out. And this is an Oscar nominated actress who was just phenomenal. And I got a message through on Instagram that my assistant was like, I didn't really look at this up, but he was like, I just got this the day I found out that the dates weren't going to work out with someone else. And I went back and looked at her, and she's just got a voice that's like an angel, amazing. And Joe, I hadn't worked with. But that
must have been like a dream. I mean, rolling the dice on Joe Pesci being in a movie is like
I know, seriously
insane, right? Because he doesn't work a lot.
And it's amazing because I on a sort of bit of a side note, I was at a friend of mine's. The reason I wrote it for him was he was a musician, and he gives me his phone and some earphones, and I got to the house and he was like, listen to this. He was like, I'll give you $100 if you can tell me who's singing. I'll give you a hint. He's an Oscar-winning actor. And I listened to it, and 20 minutes in, it's one song after another. I'm like, this guy, he sounds like Jimmy Scott. He's got this certain pitch and this tone, and I mean, like masterful. I mean, just an incredible voice. Like you never heard. Finally, I was like, who the fuck is it? And he goes, it's Joe Pesci. And I was in the middle of coming up with the story for the movie, and I was like, that's the dad. That's the dad. Because the voice, it's like something with the voice.
It worked in that way for you too. Interesting.
Yeah. Wow. So that was cool. That was great.
Wow.
And Joe's one of those people who, if you got the thoroughbred, you just let him run.
Yeah.
And Mike's like that. Pitt is unbelievable in this film because he was someone who we spent so much time talking about certain things before the film. Like he came and lived with me for 10 days before the film started. Like we were in the same apartment, talking about our fathers and certain abusive moments in our life and what was going on, really getting just deep in there. That when it came to filming, I could just, give him a little nudge on one thing. And, went and I let him run. And anytime it felt like it was going a little too far the other way, you'd say, come back to the text if you find it, come back there. It's a guide. But there was such beauty in that performance because it was so real. It was so natural. It was just him. And it was why it was, and he knew that I wrote it for him and I wouldn't make it about him. So it was a lovely, it was a utter trust back and forth between the two of us.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
When do we get to see this movie? What's going on?
Oh man, we had such a great run
long.
with it. And, we did such, it's done so well and got, at the festivals and stuff like that. But it was just such a year of I was bringing out and I was like, all of my favorite and most revered filmmakers would bring out their movies. I was like, I'll wait until next year for this one. And I feel like maybe it's a small film. It's it's black and white. We bring in little bits of color in certain areas of it. It's period. But it's a very intimate film and tragic and beautiful in many ways and just with exceptional performances and a film like this won't be made in the future if it doesn't get the support of an audience. So I want the film to come out in a time when I feel like the audience really can respond to it and go and see it. So I think we might have that this year, later this year. That might be a really good place for it. So,
yes, before the world ends, you mean?
Yes, exactly. Just before the world ends.
Before the fascist
regime. Oh my God, I mean, the thought of it. And by the way, the films, it's an ode to the films, homage to the films that I loved. It's a heartbreaker. It is sentimental, but it is melancholic. It has all those moments. I wish people understood also that cinema, independent cinema, is a sacred beast.
Yeah.
That, it is going to be gone any second.
That's right.
If we don't nurture it.
That's right.
And new filmmakers and new voices and people who are willing to put themselves out there. You know what? What you can do is you can raise these films up.
Yep.
Because the big movies, the big directors, they don't need your help.
They don't need the oxygen.
They don't need your help. They don't need the oxygen.
That's what I said.
We need it.
That's right.
We desperately need it. Independent film needs it. New filmmakers need it. New voices need it, because you need to raise up just to get a film made. Good for fucking you, man.
Yeah.
Find all the good points and hammer it home, because all we need is people to go and watch our films.
Yep.
And what they're sort of like subsequently doing by, and this is nothing to do with me or my film, I'm just talking about in general, which I noticed in the business, is you're ruining your own jobs, you're ruining your own business by not supporting these films.
Yep.
Because, fewer and fewer movies are going to the cinema.
Right.
And fewer people are going seeing it, because if you don't, raise awareness, nobody's going to turn up.
And they're the people that should be raising awareness, because they can. And sometimes I want to just reach out and be like, why is this the 500th article about a Spider-Man or some fucking bullshit?
Right.
Why do you feel like you need to contribute to that idiot when it's a bad movie anyway?
There's 365 reviews about the last Marvel movie.
And even if they're saying like it's bad, it's still oxygen that goes to it.
Absolutely.
That's even saying it's bad.
Absolutely.
Is
It's
oxygen.
been talked about.
Yeah.
At least you're talking about it. Talk about our film. Pose the questions.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Get people to go see it. My thing is, I love the experience of watching a film, especially an original movie.
Yeah.
And having that experience. And it's hard because, of course there are the streams, but like just that idea of going to the cinema, man. I mean, when we were kids, it was possibly the greatest feeling that's ever sort of happened. The moment when you're like, oh man, we're going to go watch a movie tonight.
Yep.
I remember the intermission, and you go get your ice cream in between, and you wait before it, and the car ride home, that warm fuzzy feeling of watching a movie.
Yep.
And now I don't think that warm fuzzy feeling exists anymore.
No.
Especially even, I've got an 8-year-old and a 10-year-old.
Mm-hmm.
And you can watch a movie anytime, in their eyes, it's like it's on Netflix, on this, it's on that. It's like even just to watch a film.
Yeah.
We had 4 TV channels in the UK. If you didn't have cable, whatever it was, that was growing up. So you'd have one movie, maybe on a weekend there'd be like the movie that you would wait for if you were at home. Yeah. So it's like
if you missed it, it's gone.
And if you missed exactly, so you get on, they'd be great films, but throughout the day you'd wait for these movies. And it was so cool, because you realize it was special. We still made it special, and now. Right. Feels like we're not, things aren't as special, but they are. And they're still there.
And it's been painful having this show, because sometimes I'm watching movies early, and I'm blown away by some of these things. I have the people come on the show, and then the films don't go anywhere, and I have to, in my own way, with my 1,000 followers, try to get people to see this stuff.
Yeah,
and I feel like I'm yelling into a black hole.
Yeah, right. Of course.
But people that have an audience who would love this film are not talking about it for some reason. It becomes a real big pet peeve of mine, man. I mean, it's and like you said, it's going to go. It's going to go bye-bye. It's not. It's
really
not.
Is.
It's
really
just not going to be money for it.
And by the way, I think one can be rather. I said I'm shameless about promoting this film, because other ones, I will yell, and I was like, please tell everybody, come and watch the movie. We need your help.
Yeah.
Film needs your help. Independent cinema needs your help.
Yeah.
There's never been a time where it's been more precarious. I'm saying, just cinema, and going to the festivals, and this last sort of being part of the last season, when you hear about the number of films that actually sold, it's next to nothing.
Yeah.
And
maybe we do need a complete gutting out
Yeah.
of everything,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
And,
Start
and
almost
building.
a reset, right? A reset to sort of like, oh my God, isn't this incredible that
Yeah.
we're doing this?
Yeah.
And isn't that beautiful? What an amazing
Yeah.
performance. And that was so perfectly worded. Or, God, did you see how they lit that? Or that amazing shot here. It's like one can find inspiration in the most strange and curious of places.
Yes.
And it is that, just that, you know, I was a younger actor. You know, there's nothing better than finding a single performance that might have been overlooked and just
Yes.
saying, wasn't that something?
Yes.
And that served as inspiration for this, and this.
Right.
Like I have moments, I have looks from films that, like, I mean, it's a weird one to say, but I remember there's a moment over here it was called The Professional. In England it was called Leon. It was
Leon the Professional,
the
yeah.
film, exactly, The Professional.
Yeah.
And there's a moment where Jean Reno is watching Singing in the Rain in an empty
Yeah.
theater,
Yeah.
and he's this hardcore assassin,
Yeah.
and he's a child, and he looks around with this childlike face, and I said, that was my inspiration for Richard Harrow. That look, that entire look,
Yeah.
was my inspiration for Richard Harrow.
Yeah.
It was just that underneath this was this child, this wonder and everything.
Yeah.
And I was like, God, man, it just broke my heart.
Yeah.
It's so funny, the slightest thing.
The slightest thing, yeah, and then it could inspire you because there is a world in that look. There is a because it's a
world.
feeling.
Yeah.
It's a feeling that you're that was elicited to you, and
Yeah.
you're trying to elicit to others.
Yes, it made me, it is a feeling.
Yeah.
It did something to me.
Yeah.
It changed me. And
Yeah.
you can actually remember all those moments
Right.
where something changed you.
Right. We got to talk about expats.
Yes.
Okay. This I did not expect to watch 5 episodes in a row because this is
man.
not.
Did it go to you?
Yes.
You now, good
Okay.
for you,
and
man.
and because this is not necessarily on paper my cup of tea in terms of a show.
Right.
What does it say to me that I just want like a spin-off with just your character?
Oh man, that's so
I mean,
cool. Dude.
that says a lot about me, I think. Maybe not such great things.
No, but David's us, man. He's
Right,
like me. He's
I
part
mean,
of
there's
everybody.
something-
You know him.
Exactly.
You know him. Like, you know that guy.
He's alive. Like,
Yeah.
did you have time? Like, I don't feel like I'm sitting here with David, which is weird.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah,
So that's
yeah.
a compliment to you, man.
Oh,
I don't
thank
know
you,
what I don't
man.
know what
Thank
you were
you.
doing there, but how long did you have with him? What kind of collaboration process was this? Because this is a unique
Yeah.
situation where you have one director,
Yeah.
writer-director for a series.
Yeah.
She's directing every episode, right?
Yeah.
And doing this like it's basically like a 8-hour
Yeah,
film.
it's like a film.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Lulu Wong, funnily enough, very early when I was doing Bulwark, I remember Michael Shannon saying to me, I go, what advice have you got for me? He goes, read everything. They're not going to read everything.
Yeah.
It's up to you. Just read it all. And, you know, the reason he said that was Jeff Nichols, when he was like, I think graduated from NYU, sent him Shotgun Stories. And he said, I wrote this for you. Would you make the movie? And guess what? Michael Shannon goes and makes Shotgun Stories. And that director turns into Jeff Nichols.
Yep.
I think very soon after that, I got a letter from Lily Wong, who was like her first feature. She said, I wrote this for you. I would love it if you were a part of it. She might have sent this letter to many people, but I read it and I said, this is great. Let's make the movie. So we went and made the first movie together. So I already know. And from the first day on set, I was like, she's on another playing field. That's where talent is everything. It just exudes from every pore of that woman's voice. She's that fucking talented. And I loved everything. She poses so many questions, a great sense of humor. So when I got a phone call about expats, and I'd heard of the book, I hadn't read it. And she goes, well, Nicole Kidman came to her with the book and said that she would do it. And she, was really given carte blanche to take the book off the page and really create something. She said, I want you to play this guy. And I was like, okay. And he was like, going for a pretty serious midlife crisis, battling with alcoholism and, but it all stems from trauma. And she goes, we've seen a lot of shows about victims. What we haven't seen is sometimes the perpetrators spend their entire life with this weight on them. And, a lot of time, I was just reading about this yesterday about, someone who was involved in some form of crash or some horrible tragedy. And a lot of time, they take their own lives. They can't live with the guilt. And she was like, I want to just make something that's from all perspectives, from the victims, from the perpetrators, the upstairs, downstairs, the migrant workers, the people who are around these people, like those on the ether, on the outside. It was such a sort of interesting one. And then she said, it's a big one, but, I had to go to Hong Kong and shoot. But she was like, you need to gain 20 pounds and you need to be willing to, run around naked for a bit. And I was like, for nobody else would you agree to it. Usually you hear actors spending 6 months like getting the best body ever. She was like, I need it. So I ended up putting on like 30 pounds. I went above and beyond.
Wow.
Literally I would get messages. Like I remember because in the hotel, she was like sending me food. She was like, you've got to keep eating. Don't think that. I was like, I might go to gym. She was like, don't do anything. Don't exert yourself. Like, you got to take it easy.
This is like a dream for me.
By the end of it, I'm not joking, but man, I'm telling you, Hong Kong, the best food ever. It's like noodles and desserts and everything they sent you. And I was like, it's the first time. But after the first 20 pounds, the last sort of 7-8 pounds, my body was shutting down on me. It was just like going, I had a few months to do it, but it was just like, oh my God. Like, God, I loved it for a while. And then I got to that moment where I was like away from my family.
Yeah.
Incredibly lonely, eating noodles at 2 a.m.
Yeah. But when your body's changed like that, does that affect how you're stepping into this dude? Because your body's literally different.
Yeah, absolutely. That's sort of why I want to do it. The physicality of him. There's a sadness to David, which I understood. And I think it does stem from that trauma, from that childhood trauma, being a perpetrator, somebody who an awful accident, that can affect your entire life. And sometimes it rears its ugly head, when you least expect it, and it can stay buried for a long time. But, I found David, the character, beautiful and tragic. I also knew him. I have, buddies. I remember I went to school in England, and there was a lot of, those expats guys whose families, they grew up in Hong Kong and who later went to Hong Kong, or, in the sort of finance world and that banking. And when I was out there, I saw a lot of Davids.
Yeah.
Going about their sort of world, their business, but just there was something just missing from their life, and they didn't know what it was. There was a sort of innate sadness to them. But there's also a lot of humor in the absurdity that Lulu brings in.
Yeah,
she's brilliant about that. She loves the absurdity of human. And she wants you to laugh. Like, there are things which are funny because if you didn't laugh, you cry, is like the way of saying it. I found her, she's so wonderful to work with, Lulu, and you can really get to it. And it's something getting into that character. He's it's an interesting time to live, and it was just after the pandemic, so everybody was having a bit of a, it was the first time we were really socializing or sort of interacting. So it was a great time to make it. And I watched it, and I'm very careful about what I really don't really like watching things that I'm in. But this I found incredibly addictive.
Yeah.
And it's a film, it's a show that's like a film, like you said. It's like amazing, very cinematic, about women as your leads, Nicole, Sarah, Yu Jiyoung, your 3 female leads, and written by women, produced by women, shot by women, art directed by women. It's the first time and the man, I was laughing, I was like, objectified. I'm the one who runs around naked, and I'm the supporting character. I was like, oh my God, it's a great reversal.
Right.
It's like, what? It's like, rather than all those leering men back in the day, and the woman who would have to do something like
this.
The
difference here, though, is that back in the day,
the one female role written by men sucked ass.
Yes,
this
right.
is an amazing role.
Oh, yeah,
right?
yeah.
And
yeah.
full, and you could sink your teeth into this.
Yeah, yeah.
We're in
and
a good
Janice
time.
Y.K. Lee, who wrote the novel, you know, a great springboard into this, you know.
Right.
And was really open and pushing Lulu and our other Alice Bell, wonderful writers who come in to take it off the page and expand upon. You know, she said the book's already been written. What's new? Come on. She loved that.
Interesting.
But Lulu was always like, we always would go back to the book because there were just these moments. She's like, we have to have this. We have to have this. So it's you know, good material, man, as always.
Well, I'm sitting here right now. I haven't finished the series, and I'm just anxious to finish it. So that's a good sign because I'm a snobby asshole.
Oh, that's wonderful.
You know, if a snobby asshole is
Yes,
like,
he's
I gotta get home and finish this thing. So that's really good.
Oh, I'm so happy, and it's one of those ones that to keep watching because you know she made episode 5 as a standalone.
Yes,
like which is so cool. It's an hour and a half. It's almost like a movie. It's the one that's playing, you know. So it's and that's very much the upstairs downstairs. It's from the you know from through the eyes of you know these workers who are around and these families and you know it's not everything's as it seems.
Right.
As it appears, you know, there are layers to everything and everybody.
Right.
And there's so much forgotten or discarded, and you know, she's beautiful in that way, Lulu. She really does see that.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Jack Huston, you got to come back on the show.
Oh, dude.
Okay?
I'd love to.
The door's always open.
Oh, you're the best, man. This is so nice. Just having a chat, man. I love that.
That's the way I like it.
I love it, man.
Back to One is a production of Filmmaker Magazine, which is a publication of The Gotham, formerly IFP. Listen to back episodes of this podcast at filmmakermagazine.com or wherever you get your podcasts.